Welcome to Wildcat Science with Mrs. Haugo. This is Human Biology, Chapter 8, Part 4. And previously on Part 3, we talked about muscle movements. We reviewed flexion, extension, and hyperextension. And then at the shoulder, it would be flexion, and then extension, and then at the knee, flexion and extension. Again, extension, and then if you're coming from here, extension. And then we talked about hyperextension, where you would have at the neck, you would have flexion, extension, and hyperextension. We also talked about abduction, adduction, and circumduction. And we talked about rotation, and then at the hip, rotation, lateral out, medial in, and talking about foot, which we briefly talked about in the skeletal system, but we didn't write it down, so please do so. Inversion is where you turn the sole of the foot medially, and eversion is where you turn the sole of the foot laterally. So inversion, eversion, here inversion, eversion. And then there are some terms just for your forearms and like wrists and your fingers. There's pronation with the palms facing down, so going from here to here, and supination, which is the palm facing up. So if you were to supinate and pronate. There's also opposition, where the thumb touches tips of fingers on the same hand. All right, let's dive into those muscles and see what those muscles can do. So skeletal muscles, please write this down. You have about 650 skeletal muscles, and you're going to have to memorize all of them. Nope, we will only study a small percentage of them. You will have to memorize 30, which if you think about 650, 30 is doable. It's also a lot easier to remember muscles if you think about what the name describes. So we're going to be looking at our worksheet when we do this. And there was one worksheet we talked about that has muscle names, and that they may indicate location, where the muscle is. They may indicate size. Is it a small or is it a large muscle? They may indicate what action does it do. Is it an abductor? Is it an adductor? It may indicate the shape. Is it shaped like a delta or a triangle? Is it shaped round? Or is it flat and large? Another one is the number of attachments of the muscle. Okay, the muscles of the head and the neck. Let's jump right in at the top. So you don't need to write this down because we're going to go through all of these. You have the temporalis, the masseter, the zygomaticus major, and your sternocleidomastoidias. So temporalis, masseter, zygomaticus major, and then your sternocleidomastoidias. All right, talking about the temporalis. So please write this down now. Its job is to elevate the mandible. You can see, well, let's look at where it is in a minute, but it can also retract the mandible. It connects the cranium to the mandible. You can see it attaches down below here on the mandible. It is very important for chewing. Before we go to the masseter, let's look at this. So it is going to elevate the mandible, retract the mandible, bring the jaw in, And like we said, it is up here, and that's something that a muscle that's often tight, so you may be able to feel some tension in there. And it's important for chewing and talking, I guess, too. Okay, now moving on to the masseter. Its job is to elevate the mandible. It's a major chewing muscle, and it connects your cheekbones or your zygomaticus to the mandible. So this one you can find, it's this big meaty part of your below, so find your cheekbone, and then it's this big meaty part between your cheekbone and your mandible. So a lot of times there's tension in that one as well, so you may feel that. The third face muscle we're going to talk about is the zygomaticus major, and that pulls up the corners of the mouth superiorly and posteriorly for smiling. And that one's going to connect the cheekbones to your mouth muscles, this orbicularis oris. So it connects the zygomatic to your orbicularis oris, and it pulls it back so you can smile, which is an important social skill, and humans have lots of face muscles because that social interaction is important for the species. You may also see that there's another one. This would be the zygomaticus minor, and that one's a little bit closer to the eye and the nose, and we're just looking here at zygomaticus major. All right, moving down to the Sternocleidomastoidias. Yeah, I think at the end, when we finish this one, we'll do a quick review of what those names tell us. So let's do this one right now. It tells you where things are located. It tells you it is a muscle with two attachments. It has an attachment on the sternum, and then on the clavicle, and then on that mastoid process, which is back here, kind of like behind your ear. There's a little bump. Okay, so it's right there, and it helps you flex the head. Also rotate the head. It's found on both sides of the neck. You have it here, you see it has two origins. And then there would be another one here, which is taken away for us to see these little muscles. And it connects the cranium back here to your clavicle and your sternum. So if you don't need to write this, but do pay attention. If you contract both sides, it flexes your neck. But if you contract your right side, it brings your head towards that side, right, and mine are probably opposite for you. And then if you contract the left side, it brings it over to the left. So when you contract it, it brings it over to that side you're contracting on. So for finding it, it's kind of this big meaty one in your neck between here and then your clavicle. And so you can kind of sometimes pinch it a little bit. And this one also tends to carry a lot of tension, so it may be kind of tender or sore. And also you can try pinching it while you rotate your neck to one side. Okay, so we talked about how the names of muscles can often tell you something about them. And this first one, temporalis, tells us the location. It is located on the temporal bone of your cranium. Also, the masseter tells us what it does. Masticate is chewing, so it tells us that it is a chewing muscle. Zygomaticus major tells us two things. It tells us it attaches to the zygomatic arch, that bone, your cheekbone, and it tells us it is the larger of the two, zygomaticus minor and zygomaticus major. And then we talked about sternocleidomastoidias, which attaches to the mastoid process back behind your ear, and then the sternum and the clavicle. Those are the 4 muscles of the head and neck that you're going to need to know. In our next video, we're going to talk about the muscles of the back, arm, and chest. All right, see you then. Bye.